Welcome to Whachacha's Tabletop World, a channel devoted to the love of board gaming. My name is Sweetness Whachacha, and today I'm ranking the Cooperative Pandemics. So Pandemic is one of my favorite all-time games. It's the game that really launched me into this hobby like 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, something like that, into this, which can only be described as fanaticism for the hobby. And this really, and it still remains today, one of my all-time favorite games to play. So I just thought it'd be fun to go through and rank all of the cooperative versions of this game. A couple quick notes before we get really started with the list here. Number one, of course, this is how they stack up in my opinion. It's just my opinion, that's it. It's just how I personally feel about it. And then also, it's just kind of interesting to me that this system is so versatile. It's so elegant, and it seems to be really easy to make different scenarios, different expansions, and hold different versions of it. How perfect a system it is to just pick it up and drop it down. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find more than a handful other games out there that you could do this with, that are designed so utterly well to do that. I also want to mention, for those perfectionists out there, I am missing rapid response on this. It's the only one I haven't played, but I do feel like I have a lot of data and enough data to really have a compelling list for you. So if you're a perfectionist and you're angry about that, you can turn the video off now, but otherwise, let's get on to the rankings. My number 15 is Pandemic: The Cure. Now, this is a little bit of a sad one to be at the bottom of the barrel here, but because, well, number one, this is designed by Matt Leacock, the original designer and the designer of many of these games on the list. And this is a dice version of the game. The Pandemic: The Cure was a dice version of the game, and it has a lot of great things going for it. You know, the dice, like, wonderful. The production itself is wonderful, and it's really fantastic to see how the dice are made and how this dice game version of it was so masterfully designed in so many ways. The fact that the dice distribution on the diseases are different and they constrict them to go to certain areas, very clever. And the way that all of the players' dice rolls, the different rolls you have, had all their different dice so that they had different distributions on them as well. There's a lot of really clever things about the design. However, one of the best parts of Pandemic for me is, you know, here's my plan, I think we should do this. And then somebody else says, this is my plan. And then you make some Frankenstein for both plans. And then also grabbing, you know, coming up like, wait, what if we did this? You know, you think you're going to lose, and then you just grab victory from the jaws of defeat because you were able to come up with some great plan. And you were like, okay, as long as we can get through the next turn, you know, and that's really exciting. But this game is like the death of planning. You have no idea what you're going to roll. And that's kind of a bummer. Also, there are scenarios where you have your dice locked up. You can't roll what you need to cure a disease, and so you don't have access to your dice, and you only have maybe one or two die, and then you roll them, and they both are biohazard symbols, and you have no turn. And I think missing a turn in a Pandemic game, it's like kind of the enemy of that elegance that I seem to love in that series. So unfortunately, this one was a real big miss for me, and that's why it's my number 15. My number 14 is Rising Tide. Now, this is another one, a bit of a bummer. I always feel sad about this, but you know, this game, what an amazing theme, what a really unique and a really almost educational theme. This is Rising Tide in the Netherlands. You know, it's an opportunity to learn about this and to have it, you know, like they have to use this technology of these dikes and these water pumps and all these interesting things. I mean, the theme and the setting is fantastic. I mean, it's really a 10. The roles, the way the game is set up, everything is really like what you would expect in a Pandemic game, and they're very, very well designed and well done. So where does this game lose me? And that's the map. And it's really a bummer because it's very difficult to really not see what's going on the map, I guess, but to really be able to process it properly. The actual base game, original Pandemic, and most of them are an abstracted map. You know, you have a picture of the location of the geography, and then you have this abstracted sort of lines and dots on top, superimposed on top of that. But the game would work if you just removed the lower image, and I think that's kind of the problem here. Now, interestingly, my friend Jesse from Cooperative Pandemic and I, we both tackled the problem from different ways, and we both tried to fix this problem. I spent a long time trying to do that similar kind of approach so you could more easily see the flow of the cubes and things by using some Photoshop and just good old, you know, pencil and paper. Jesse always has a bit of a different approach to me, and he was trying to write some code and to do some stuff with the computer and kind of try to figure out a way to do it. So we both kind of try to do that. I may revisit that one day, but I think this game is very close to being great. It just like fix that map, I think make it a little easier to process that data, and you've got a winner of a game. But unfortunately for now, it's my number 14. My number 13 is Reign of Cthulhu. Now this is a game I resisted playing for years because I thought, get those dice out of my Pandemic game. And now it's interesting because if you look at the totality of the Pandemic games, like most of them, I think at this point, at least half of them have dice, which is kind of an interesting concept. But this game has, I love like that balance of luck is that you have your hand of cards and you have the deck and then you have the enemy deck. And there's really no other real randomness there. And so I was a little bit resistant, and I think rightly so to that. There's a row of cards up top and there's dice rolling. So those are just some added additional areas of randomness that I sort of felt was unwelcome in my game. The game does play quite well, actually. It's not a bad Pandemic game. I wouldn't hate it if I had to play it, if it was the only game in town. But this I should mention a little bit more that this is using the Lovecraft world of Arkham and all those different kind of Kingsport and all that kind of stuff. And it has great old ones, and there are some events up top and stuff. So while not a bad version of the game, I was actually a little bit surprised that I didn't really hate it. Certainly, it's not going to be the first one I go to. There's plenty of other games that I enjoy much more in the Pandemic world. My number 12 is, I'm lumping these two together. It's Hot Zone Europe and Hot Zone North America. If that angers you, you can just add one to all the other games and just put these back to back. Now, these are very similar type of games, why I put them together, nested them together. And they're essentially I don't want to use the word dumbed down, but they're much more simplified version, much more approachable version of Pandemic. Now, I think that's really where this goes off the rails, because Pandemic is pretty simplified as it is. It's very approachable. It's not really, maybe it's gateway weight, I would say. And one of the reasons it succeeded is because of that approachability. So like stripping it down and simplifying some of it seems like a weird choice to me and an unnecessary choice. I guess I could understand why the marketers would say but to me, like if you can play the one, surely you can play the other. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why is this game not at the end of the list? Why is it up a few? It's because there's a mode in here called Hemispheres, and that's where you take both of these little base games and you add them together. And it creates a really interesting little mode where one player plays three characters for North America, and the other player plays 3 characters for Europe. And you're sort of playing your own game some, but you're also able to shoot cards over and to help each other and go onto the other player's mats and stuff like that. So I love that. When I play Pandemic, I always play 2 characters. Like if I play with my wife, I play 2 characters, and she plays 2 characters. Other people don't particularly like that style of playing. So, but for me, I love it. I think it's really fascinating. And this game really has that interesting aspect to it, where you're playing a full complement of 6 characters, but it's 3 and 3, and that really leads to some interesting things. It's just a nice little take on it. I don't know if it's worth buying both games just for this mode. I've thought about that quite a lot. I don't own this one, either of these, though I have played it, and every time I go to the game store and I see it, I think to myself, should I? Is it worth it to get both? But I haven't pulled that trigger just yet. But that's my number 12. That's Hot Zones. My number 11 is just the base game of Pandemic, the OG, the original. And it's still a great game. It's still a fantastic game. And taking all of the other roles and expansions and things and just playing this base game is fantastic. It's also got heroic mode that you can play in here for an added challenge, and I think that's still really worthwhile and still very enjoyable. Obviously, these other games, a lot of these other games have surpassed it in my mind, but it's that one of those, it's like you're standing on the shoulders of giants type thing. We wouldn't have anything else if it wasn't for this, and it's still a really solid game and still very playable. If I didn't have any of the other Pandemics, I'd still be playing this and loving it. And that's my number 11, the OG Pandemic. My number 10 is On the Brink, and that's the very first expansion for Pandemic. This sort of blew my mind at the time because I wasn't, I was aware of board gaming expansions and things, but it was really my, as I say, my first foray into this. And I remember like the Bioterrorist. I thought, this is amazing. What a great idea, this Bioterrorist. Well, it didn't really stand the test of time. I didn't really enjoy the Bioterrorist part of it, and over the course of the years, you kind of like figure out like co-ops are generally pretty good as co-ops, and competitives are pretty good as competitives, and mostly those two twain shall not meet. But this one did what a really great expansion needs to do, and that's just to make the game maybe a little harder, but mostly to just make it more, give it more variety, and that's to change it up and like add these other challenges. It had the mutation challenge, it had the virulent strain challenge, and it just changed the way you played the game. It just changed the challenge and added more variety, and that's what you need. Oh, and of course the new roles add variety to the original game and to this one. So what a great little expansion. Still stands up today. That's On the Brink, my number 10. My number 9 is Pandemic World of Warcraft. Now this one really surprised me. I don't really care about the IP at all. I have no interest in it at all, really. But this one was a really solid, very interesting little way of playing the game. Number 1, it looks fantastic on the table. The miniatures look really great. The Lich King, that's the subtitle of the title. He looks great, and he has this little tower that you add to the board and put him on top of that. And the game really has this idea of like, there's the most of the game, and then there's the finale. And that's really exciting, actually. And it doesn't add too much headache or too many crazy new rules or anything to play around, but it does provide like a really fantastic little conclusion. The other things that it does that I think is really, really cool are you have these each character that you pick, not only do they have a main power, but they sort of have the secondary power. And I really like having that a little more variety in the characters. Also, the missions and things can change game to game and the different constraints that they give you. And really one of the things that this did to stretch the system and to change the system the most was to really make the cards like these multi-use cards where you don't know, should I spend this, to have this extra ability or extra action or thing to do, or should I hang on to it to use it in a more traditional sense? And I really like having those extra decisions and that extra design space working there. I thought that was really cool. It does seem a little easier than most pandemics. I think your deck is a lot thicker, and so you tend to like go through it. That's usually one of the major ways you lose Pandemic is by simply running out of time. You don't have enough time to do things, and that's, I think, maybe why it makes it a little easier. The other thing is that the dice rolling doesn't really bother me in this. It's kind of interesting because if you have a lot of hits, then you knock the enemies out. But if you don't roll a lot of hits, then you roll shield, so you won't take a lot of damage from the enemies. All it does is kind of waste your time a little bit, which of course is usually a very precious commodity in the Pandemic game. So I thought that was a very interesting way to do it. This game actually completely, I don't know why anybody would play. I didn't particularly care for Defenders of the Realm myself. It's kind of an interesting game to bring up during this conversation because it took Pandemic, maybe the first game, to really have an offshoot and a different idea and a design for Pandemic, a different take on it. But to me, there's a lot of problems in that game. I didn't prefer it myself. I don't want to get into a whole discussion about that, but to me, this game really almost replaces that. And speaking of replacing, this game is a little bit lower. I love it, but there's another game on the list that came out just after this that completely supplanted this, and I'll talk about that in a bit. It's just the other game has a lot more replayability, and it kind of rendered this game obsolete. However, we'll get to that when we get to it. That was my number 9, World of Warcraft Pandemic. My number 8 is State of Emergency. Now, this was an expansion that didn't get a lot of love. People didn't really care for it too much, and I think that's due to a couple different things. Of course, I can't speak for others, but I would say that I think that when this came out, Pandemic was sort of flooding the market. It was a little oversaturated, and it was really overshadowed by a larger game of Pandemic that came out in close proximity to it. So I think people just kind of fell off. People didn't really think about it and really play it very much. But I think that it has some very fascinating little challenges in here. The Hinterlands challenge, which deals with animals and animal disease and how things spread that way, added a very interesting element, and I think that scenario was very fascinating. Some of the characters in here were some of the most interesting characters to bring into the game as well. Again, you see these sort of same characters used in the larger game, and unfortunately I think that people just kind of forgot about that, but I like having those characters available to play in other Pandemics. This also had the Superbug Challenge, which is one of the most difficult challenges that you can combine with many other scenarios and other expansions and other game types for Pandemic, which I found was very, very interesting. Yeah, so the roles in here are really good. The different things in there I really loved. And the idea of the animals things just thematically is very interesting to me. Because I remember when COVID was really kind of getting going and stuff, and people were like, well, if everybody's just away from everybody, will that just kill off all of the diseases and all of the illnesses and stuff? But it's amazing how much illness and stuff comes from animals. So just having livestock and things in the world and the country and stuff, that there's a lot of cross-species stuff. So it's very kind of a fascinating little thematic way to go as well. But yeah, I think I really wish people would respond better to this, or would maybe give it another chance, because I really liked this expansion. That's my number 8, State of Emergency. Okay, my number 7 is Fall of Rome. Now this is one that I didn't feel like I was going to like. I was another one a little bit surprised by. It's kind of interesting because it kind of mimics Defenders of the Realm, which I brought up a little while ago. It's sort of like art imitates life, imitates art, imitates life. It's kind of like one of those weird things because it uses a very similar thing where like everybody's going in these lines. So all these Germanic tribes are trying to sack Rome, and they're all sort of coming in these lines. And it's interesting because you can try to break those lines, and it adds just another interesting element to Pandemic, just the way that the cubes come out. But one of the most interesting things that this system does is that you can choose to either go what you would use normally as healing, curing a disease. Instead of that, you can eradicate without curing it. You can kill everyone, as long as all your other goals are done. So that's one interesting thing. But also you can ally. So you can go in the more traditional sense. So you can eradicate or ally. But if you eradicate, you have to do all at the same time. And the thing that makes it very fascinating, why that comes together in such a nice little package, is because the quantities of those cards are a lot more limited. So like one tribe might have a lot less coming out. But it also has a lot less cards. And so that's really a fascinating little push-pull. And you kind of decide, let's try to eradicate. And then you're like, no, that's not going to work. And then it makes those cards much more a painful decision. Like, can I get rid of this card? Or, and then also there's a whole recruiting troops and things. And when you should go choose to fight with them. And how many you should bring to your fight. And where you should set up forts. So it does a lot of things that really push the boundaries of this design. Not as much as some of the others, but it does a really interesting thing. I do want to mention as well that this Pandemic features a character, a role in here that I think is the most wizardly or magical maybe in any game ever. I know that's a pretty tall order, a big statement to make, but this is an established system, okay? Just like we have our laws of physics and reality and stuff that we deal with in our lives. And this character and this game system of Pandemic has been so well established, and you're playing the game in such a, these are the rules, and this is the way the game is played. And this character can bring events from outside of the game into the game. And it's such a fascinating thing for me because it's like kind of like magic. Like, instead of getting rid of cubes, you're getting rid of troops and enemy fighters. And then this character is just like, okay, well, for my action, I'm just going to bring in these events. And it's a very powerful character if you use it properly. And it's very fascinating. And it's also very different than anything else you can play in Pandemic. And I think that really is such a fascinating little thing to me. Just that, it represents all of these powers and all these unique things that it can do that are completely different than any other character in any other Pandemic game can do. And it just feels really like some kind of a wizard or something. And I think that's very fascinating. The Roma challenge that's in here as well is a very difficult challenge, and it provides a very interesting puzzle to solve. So overall, yeah, this is a really solid one. That's Fall of Rome, my number 7. My number 6 is Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now, this is another one that I really don't care that much about the IP, but this one I think, out of all the games, other than the Legacy games, really pushes what Pandemic can do. And I find this to be so fascinating. You can play cards into your tableau, and you can only play so many. But you can sort of push your character into being able to do stealth or to fight or to travel, and you kind of have to decide what you're going to be good at. You also have your character's power, and that kind of provides a multi-level thing. But then what this game really opens up is the ability to have these different scenarios. And each of the different villains that you'll fight in the box, they play different, they test different things that you have to you have to answer that challenge in different ways of each of these villains. And then they each have, much like the Lich King version, the Warcraft version, they each have this little finale that you flip over the card and you say, oh, now we have to do this as a final little showdown, which is very cinematic and very exciting. I feel like this game, unfortunately, the Lich King is one sliver of this game, whereas it has much more variety. It's like you're playing the version of Warcraft over and over and over again in different ways. And that's why I think it kind of renders that particular game obsolete for me personally. But this is the one I think has the most promise for future Pandemic games. I would love to see just a book or a full Gloomhaven sized box of just different villains and different scenarios, and you just keep playing Pandemic each time and playing against a different villain and having a different kind of puzzle to solve. That would just absolutely be fascinating to me. I think that might be my rocket up to be my favorite game of all time. Just kind of a living game or a longer game where you can really play with this system in the way that they do. I really yeah, super fun, super replayable, and what a nice evolution. And I can't wait to see. I mean, I'd love to see if they made an expansion or something. Again, I think for fans of the IP, for fans of the Clone Wars and stuff, I have a very complicated history with Star Wars, but I would love to see, an expansion for this one. I think out of maybe all of the pandemics that exist right now, this would be my most coveted to see an expansion because I think it has such promise. So that's my number 6, Star Wars Clone Wars. My number 5 is In the Lab. Now, what a great expansion. Again, after On the Brink came out, In the Lab came out, and it did really, you need more, right? You like On the Brink did exactly what an expansion should do, but this you needed to elevate it more. And what a fascinating challenge it is, both thematically, to have this lab, to have your centrifuge and your separators and stuff, and to have those petri dishes and putting them in petri dishes, adding that complexity because pandemic so well, adding that difficulty and that new challenge, and also that thematic challenge. What a fantastic thing. And then you can take all of the other modules and things, other expansions, and add them to this challenge to change it even further. When this came out, it really blew me away. I was so excited about it. It did have a little bit of a controversy because you had to buy an updated version of Pandemic to play it. But I mean, to me, like I play so much of this stuff, it was an easy thing to do, or easy pill to swallow. But this is a very what else can I say about it? It's just a really thematic, fantastic product, and it still holds up today. That's In the Lab. Oh, and before I get too far away, actually, I should also mention some really great roles in this one as well. It just keep adding these roles, and just some really fascinating roles. And that's one of the great things about this, is that those roles make, it's like exponential. They make the other, you can mix and match some of the other roles that are in existence until you have so many combinations, and then you can play the game in so many different ways that it really keeps the game, that puzzle, fresh and exciting. My number 4 is Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Now, this game is a legacy game, which I absolutely love. Fantastic stuff. I know a lot of people aren't for them, but this particular one, I think is the most ambitious one that they've done. But I think that it's one of the most innovative ones that they've done. But the story is the best. The kind of the twists, the callbacks, the finale. Very well written, and there's some moments in there like, oh my god, that's amazing. And like these like Twilight Zone moments, like when you see the end of a Twilight Zone and you're like, whoa, they were all monsters. I don't know. Really kind of cool stuff. Sorry for that weird analogy, but just phenomenal stories. I'm just kind of not trying to say any spoilers or anything, so it's kind of limiting. But a lot more freedom in terms of how you explore, how you draw out the map and stuff, which adds a lot more replayability. But I think all that comes at the cost a little bit of making the game not as tight, that tight optimization and that really elegant design that is present in most Pandemic games. So that's why I think it's my least favorite of the legacies, although it does have the strongest story and the most freedom, and I think the most replayability. I've only played this one time. I'm really looking forward to playing it again, but that's my number 4, Pandemic Legacy Season 2. My number 3 is Iberia. Now this one is just so good. I both thematically love Portugal and Spain, and I love to be in that world and to learn a little bit more about that geography than I know now. I think this one tests you in very interesting ways. I think it has a couple of real big strengths. Number one, I really like the roles in this one. They're interesting. But the biggest part is like that railroad and be able to make that route. You don't have the flight anymore, and that's very thematic to the time, And building out those railroad routes and trying to tightly optimize how you can move around this board is a very fascinating puzzle. And you might think like, oh, I should always run it up the middle, or there's certain ways you might think to do it, but when those initial cities come out, those cities are the ones that are going to get moved in and out. You're going to be seeing those over and over again, so you should maybe build the route that way, and then you can kind of discuss that. There's also other interesting things with the water, but my favorite part of this whole thing is the idea of these different diseases that are characterized, historically, and they behave in different ways. So they have some of the best parts of some of the other pandemics, with like virulent strain and things like that. So they have cholera, which when it outbreaks, it goes farther. You have yellow fever. When it's on a coastal city, it gets more because those ports, attract more people and things. And there's the malaria is another one. So it really adds some very interesting parts to that, and some interesting challenges, and you can combine them and stuff. And that's really, really fascinating. This one is one that I've played this version, I don't know, close to 100 times. I played it an insane amount of times. This one is just so replayable and so great, and such an interesting variation on normal Pandemic while still retaining all of the strengths that make normal Pandemic great. That's my number 3, Iberia. My number 2 is Pandemic Season 0. Now this one, again, another legacy game, and it just was an incredible gaming experience for me. Like, you finish a game and you love that time in between the games. You can upgrade and choose different things that you're going to do, and you just I gotta play again. I gotta play again. I mean, I'm just feverish to play more and unlock more and see more. Now, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to have any spoilers here, but I don't want to say there's paths, but there's different, you can't do everything that the game gives you. It says you can do a bunch of these things and you have to pick and choose. And I think that's kind of interesting. I've only played this one once as well, but it would be interesting to try to like push in a different direction. Again, trying to be vague here, but yeah, the story is absolutely stellar. The gameplay is absolutely fantastic, and it brings, so many interesting mechanisms and things while retaining still that tight core that makes that Pandemic such an elegant and an enjoyable game to play. That's my number 2, Pandemic Season 0. And what can I say for my number 1 is Pandemic Season 1. There's a reason it was on number 1 on Board Game Geek for years, I think. I don't know how long it was on there, but it really deservedly so to be there. What a fantastic gaming experience, maybe one of my favorite gaming experiences of all time, to just play through this it was just different enough so that your game was personalized to you, the board was personalized to you, keeping that board afterwards, so fantastic. But on rails enough to keep the elegance and interesting game mechanisms and game decisions and choices that you make, having them matter and make sense. So it was like having your cake and eating it too, having an amazing story, a puzzle that was changing all the time, reflecting what your choices were, having that permanence in the game, but also still retaining all of the well-designed game of Pandemic. So I played through this one twice. I would play through it more, honestly. It's such an enjoyable thing. The second time you play through it, you kind of know everything that's going to happen, and so you can plan a lot better, and you can kind of, I don't want to say crush it, but you can really get a great leverage on the game. It's been a number of years since I played it now, so I think returning to it, I might have a little more of a challenge at this point, but it's kind of a fascinating thing to play them multiple times. But yeah, this is such just a wonderful, like, coveted experience that I've had playing this. It's one of the best. I'd be hard pressed to find another game that really affected me in such a way. So what a great amount of fun. And again, I can't say too much because I don't want to have any spoilers there, but that idea of being able to play, if you fail the month, you can play it again. If you fail it again, you're moving on. If you win it, you just move on. And added to that elegance of the design. So yeah, that was my number 1 season 1, Pandemic Season 1. So there's my games of Pandemic ranked. Please, if you think I'm totally wrong or I'm totally right or whatever, please feel free to comment below. But for now, I gotta roll.